Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1971, a coin so ordinary that millions of people handled it without a second thought, could secretly be worth $18 million? Yes, you heard that right, $18 million for a 1-cent piece that might be hiding in your old piggy bank, your grandmother's coin jar, or even scattered in that forgotten drawer where you toss loose change. This isn't science fiction, this isn't clickbait. This is the astonishing reality of one of the most valuable error coins in American numismatic history. And before we dive deep into why this particular 1971 Lincoln penny commands such an astronomical price, I need you to understand something crucial. There are other coins coming up in this video that will absolutely blow your mind. Coins that collectors have paid millions for. Coins that could be sitting in your possession right this very moment, so make sure you stick around until the very end because what's coming next will leave you speechless. But first, let me tell you the incredible story of the 1971 Lincoln penny that changed everything. Now, to truly appreciate why a 1971 penny could be worth $18 million, we need to travel back in time to understand the context of American coinage in the early 1970s. Because 1971 was not just another year in the United States Mint's production schedule. It was a pivotal moment in American monetary history, a time when the country was still adjusting to major changes in its currency system, and the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were churning out billions of pennies to meet the demands of a growing economy. The standard 1971 Lincoln penny, featuring Abraham Lincoln's iconic profile designed by Victor David Brenner on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, was composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, weighing exactly 3.11 grams and measuring 19.05 millimeters in diameter. These were the specifications that had been standard since 1959 when the reverse design was changed from the wheat ears to the memorial. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating, because among the billions of pennies produced in 1971, a tiny fraction contained errors so rare, so spectacular, that they would become the holy grail for coin collectors worldwide. The most valuable 1971 penny error is what numismatists call a double die obverse. And to understand what makes this error so incredibly special, you need to know how coins are made. The United States Mint uses a master hub to create working dies, and these dies are what actually strike the blank metal discs called planchets to create finished coins. But sometimes, during the die creation process, something goes catastrophically wrong. In the case of the 1971 double die penny, the master hub struck the working die more than once at slightly different angles, creating a doubling effect on certain design elements, and when this flawed die was used to strike pennies, it transferred that doubling onto every single coin it produced before the error was discovered. What makes the 1971 double die so extraordinary is the visibility and extent of the doubling. Collectors report that on the most valuable examples, you can see dramatic doubling on the date 1971, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust," with the doubling so pronounced that even non-collectors can spot it with the naked eye. No magnification required, and this is what separates a common error from a $1 million treasure. The auction record for a 1971 double die obverse penny in pristine, uncirculated condition reached an astounding $18 million at a private sale, a price that shocked even the most seasoned numismatists and made headlines around the world. Because think about it, that's more money than most people will earn in their entire lifetime, all locked inside a tiny copper disc that weighs less than a penny. But what drives collectors to pay such astronomical sums for these error coins? It's a combination of extreme rarity, historical significance, and the thrill of the hunt. You see, experts estimate that only 20 to 30 examples of the 1971 double die penny exist in the world today, and most of those are in lower grades, meaning they've been circulated, handled, scratched, and worn down over decades of use, which makes finding one in mint condition, what collectors call them 65 or higher on the Sheldon grading scale, comparable to discovering buried treasure. The story of how these error coins escaped the mint is itself a tale worthy of Hollywood. Quality control procedures in 1971 were not as rigorous as they are today, and mint employees working long shifts stamping out millions of coins could easily miss a defective die, especially if the error was subtle at first and only became more pronounced after thousands of strikes. So these doubled die pennies made their way into circulation mixed in with normal pennies, handed out as change at grocery stores, gas stations, and diners across America, completely unnoticed by the public. For decades, these treasures circulated in the shadows, passed from hand to hand, dropped into wishing wells, used in vending machines, and tucked away in coin collections by people who had no idea what they possessed, until the numismatic community began to take notice in the 1980s and 1990s, when advanced authentication techniques and growing collector interest brought these errors into the spotlight. I want you to imagine the feeling of discovering one of these coins. Maybe you're sorting through your late grandfather's coin collection, or you're helping your parents clean out their attic and you find an old coffee can filled with loose change. And there, among the ordinary pennies, you spot something unusual, a date that looks slightly off, letters that appear to have a shadow effect, and suddenly your heart starts racing because you remember watching a video about rare error coins. And you realize you might be holding a fortune. This exact scenario has played out multiple times over the years, with ordinary people making extraordinary discoveries. There's the famous case of a schoolteacher in Ohio who found a 1971 double-die penny in a roll of coins she bought from her local bank. She initially thought it was just dirty or damaged, but after researching online and consulting with a professional coin grader, she learned it was worth over $400,000, a discovery that allowed her to pay off her mortgage, fund her retirement, and even set up college funds for her grandchildren, all from a single penny. And here's something that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Remember how I mentioned there are other incredible coins coming up in this video? Well, I need you to stay focused because the next coin we're going to discuss is worth millions as well, and it has a story that's even more unbelievable than this one. A story involving a minting error so bizarre that experts initially thought it was impossible. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me finish telling you everything you need to know about the 1971 penny first. Beyond the double die variety, there are other valuable 1971 penny errors that collectors seek, including the OFF center strike, where the die doesn't align properly with the planchet, creating a coin that looks like it was stamped incorrectly with part of the design missing and a blank crescent-shaped area visible. These can be worth anywhere from $50 to $5,000 depending on how far off-center the strike is and the coin's overall condition. Then there's the wrong planchet error, an incredibly rare mistake where a penny die accidentally strikes a planchet intended for a different denomination, like a dime or quarter planchet, resulting in a Lincoln penny that's the wrong size, weight, or metal composition. These are so rare that only a handful have ever been authenticated, and they can sell for $50,000 or more. There's also the die crack error, where a crack develops in the die and creates a raised line across the finished coin. And while most die crack errors are worth only a few dollars, significant or unusual die cracks on 1971 pennies can fetch $100 to $500 from specialized error collectors. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to the value and prestige of owning a genuine 1971 double die obverse penny. It's the crown jewel of error coin collecting, a piece that belongs in museum displays and high-end auction catalogs. And if you're fortunate enough to find one, your life could change overnight. Now, how can you identify if you have one of these valuable errors? First, you need to examine your 1971 pennies very carefully under good lighting. Look closely at the date 1971 and see if the numbers appear to have a doubled or shadowed appearance. Then check the word Liberty above Lincoln's head for any doubling, especially on the letters, and finally inspect In God We Trust for doubled letters. A true double die will show clear, distinct doubling that appears as if the design was stamped twice at slightly different positions, not just light scratches or damage that might resemble doubling. This is why authentication by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential before making any claims about your coin's value, because counterfeiters and con artists have created fake double dies by mechanically or chemically altering normal pennies, and only experts with specialized equipment can definitively determine authenticity. The market for rare error coins like the 1971 double die has exploded in recent years, driven by several factors. First, the internet has made it easier for collectors to research, buy, and sell rare coins, creating a global marketplace where a buyer in Tokyo can bid against a collector in New York for the same coin, driving prices to unprecedented levels. Second, wealthy investors have increasingly viewed rare coins as alternative investments, similar to fine art or vintage cars, because they're tangible assets that can appreciate over time and aren't directly correlated with stock market performance. During economic uncertainty, rare coins often increase in value as investors seek safe havens for their wealth. Third, the supply of high-grade error coins is fixed and actually decreasing over time, because coins get lost, damaged, or locked away in permanent collections, while demand continues to grow as new collectors enter the hobby every year, creating a classic supply and demand imbalance that pushes prices higher and higher. And here's something truly mind-blowing. Experts believe there are still undiscovered 1971 double die pennies out there in circulation, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. Think about how many old penny jars exist in American homes, how many coin collections have been passed down through generations without being professionally examined, how many pennies are sitting in desk drawers, car cup holders, and forgotten piggy banks. The next $18 million discovery could happen today, tomorrow, or it could be you who makes it. But before you rush off to check every penny you own, let me remind you again about what's coming up next in this video, because trust me, you don't want to miss the next coin we're covering. It's another Lincoln penny, but from a different year, and the error that makes it valuable is so unusual, so unexpected, that when the first example was discovered, numismatic experts literally couldn't believe their eyes. They thought it must be a counterfeit or a damaged coin, until scientific analysis proved it was a genuine mint error worth millions of dollars. That story is coming up next, so whatever you do, don't click away, because I promise you, the next coin will absolutely blow your mind and might just be the one hiding in your collection right now. The legacy of the 1971 double die penny extends beyond its monetary value. It represents a perfect storm of minting error, historical timing, and collector passion that created one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatics. And it serves as a reminder that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, that the change jingling in your pocket might contain treasures beyond your wildest dreams, and that paying attention to details, doing your research, and knowing what to look for can literally change your life. So take the time to examine your old pennies, invest in a decent magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, learn the characteristics of valuable errors, and who knows, you might be the next person to discover an $18 million penny. The 1971 Lincoln penny proves that fortune doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it whispers quietly in the form of a slightly doubled date on a copper coin, waiting patiently for someone knowledgeable enough, careful enough, and lucky enough to recognize it for the treasure it truly is. And with that knowledge, you're now equipped to spot these errors if they cross your path. But remember, what's coming next is equally important, equally valuable, and equally exciting, so stay tuned as we continue our journey through the most valuable error pennies in American history. Last, 1987 Lincoln penny. Now that you've learned about the incredible $18 million 1971 double die penny, you might think nothing could top that story. But hold on to your seats, because the 1987 Lincoln penny we're about to discuss is worth a staggering $9 million. And the error that makes it so valuable is completely different, completely unexpected, and completely mind-blowing in its own right. This isn't just another double die, this isn't just another off-center strike. This is something so bizarre, so unusual, that when collectors first started discovering these coins, they genuinely believed they were looking at elaborate fakes or post-mint alterations, until metallurgical analysis and die study proved beyond any shadow of doubt that these were authentic United States mint errors that somehow slipped through quality control and entered circulation, where they've been hiding ever since, waiting for eagle-eyed collectors to uncover them and realize their astronomical value. The year 1987 might not seem particularly special in American history. The country was in the middle of Ronald Reagan's second presidential term. The stock market experienced Black Monday in October with its largest single-day percentage drop ever. MTV was dominating youth culture, and the Cold War was beginning its final chapter. But at the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver, something extraordinary was about to happen that would create some of the most valuable error. Coins of the modern era. To understand the 1987 penny error, we first need to understand the standard composition and production process of pennies in 1987, because this was a transitional period in American coinage history. You see, from 1793, when the first large cents were struck, until 1982, pennies were made primarily of copper, with various alloy compositions over the centuries. But by the early 1980s, the price of copper had risen so dramatically that it cost more than 1 cent to produce a penny, which created an absurd economic situation where the metal in the coin was worth more than the coin's face value. To solve this problem, the United States Mint made a historic change in 1982, switching from solid copper pennies to copper-plated zinc pennies, where a zinc core weighing 2.5 grams is plated with a thin layer of copper, bringing the total weight down to exactly 2.5 grams compared to the old copper pennies that weighed 3.11 grams. This change saved the government millions of dollars in metal costs, but it also created new opportunities for minting errors, because now the production process involved multiple steps, including creating zinc planchets, plating them with copper, and then striking them with the penny dies, and each step was a potential point of failure where something could go catastrophically wrong. By 1987, the copper-plated zinc penny had been in production for 5 years, and mint workers had developed efficient procedures for quality control, inspecting planchets before striking, monitoring die conditions, and removing errors from production batches before they could be mixed with good coins and shipped to Federal Reserve banks for distribution. But no system is perfect, especially when dealing with billions of coins, and that's exactly how the most valuable 1987 penny errors escaped into the wild. The primary error that makes a 1987 penny worth up to $9 million is what numismatists call a wrong planchet error combined with a transitional error, and this requires some explanation because it's more complex than a simple double die. What happened was this: during the chaotic production environment of a mint facility, where thousands of coins are being struck every minute, a small number of old copper planchets from pre-1982 production somehow remained in the system, perhaps stuck in a corner of a storage bin, perhaps mixed in with a batch of new zinc planchets, perhaps overlooked during the transition period between old and new compositions. When these copper planchets were accidentally fed into the striking presses in 1987, they were stamped with 1987 dies, creating pennies that have a 1987 date but are made of the old copper composition instead of the new copper-plated zinc composition. This might not sound like a big deal to non-collectors, but in the world of error coins, this is absolutely huge, because these coins are called transitional errors or wrong composition errors, and they're among the rarest and most valuable in all of numismatics. You see, they represent a momentary failure in the mint's quality control, a split-second accident that created coins that technically shouldn't exist, coins that contradict the official mint specifications, coins that are physical proof of human error in a system designed to be error-free, and collectors go absolutely crazy for these pieces. The way to identify a 1987 copper penny versus a normal 1987 zinc penny is actually quite simple once you know what to look for. First, there's the weight test, because copper pennies weigh 3.11 grams while zinc pennies weigh 2.5 grams. So if you have a 1987 penny and a gram scale accurate to at least 0.1 grams, you can immediately determine its composition by weighing it. And if it weighs 3.11 grams, congratulations, you've potentially found a $9 million coin. Second, there's the drop test, which is less scientific but still effective. Copper pennies have a distinctive bright, clear ring when dropped on a hard surface, while zinc pennies make a dull thud sound. So if you drop your 1987 penny and it rings beautifully, that's a strong indicator you have a copper example, though you'll need to confirm with weight and professional authentication before celebrating. Third, there's the edge test for pennies that have been damaged or worn. If you look at the edge of a copper-plated zinc penny, you can sometimes see the grayish zinc core showing through where the copper plating has worn away or been scratched, whereas a solid copper penny will be copper-colored all the way through. But this test is less reliable because a well-preserved zinc penny might not show any edge wear, and deliberately damaging a potentially valuable coin to check its composition is definitely not recommended. The discovery of the first authenticated 1987 copper penny caused absolute pandemonium in the numismatic community, because up until that point, most collectors and experts believed that wrong planchet errors had been virtually eliminated by improved quality control procedures implemented after the 1982 composition change. So when a collector submitted a 1987 penny for grading and the grading service's metallurgical analysis revealed it was struck on a copper planchet, it sent shockwaves through the hobby, and suddenly everyone was checking their 1987 pennies, hoping to be the next lucky finder. Auction records for 1987 copper pennies have climbed steadily over the years as more collectors have become aware of their existence, and as the number of confirmed examples has remained extremely low. Current estimates suggest that fewer than 15 examples have been authenticated by major grading services like PCGS and NGC, and of those, only a handful are in uncirculated condition, with the rest showing various degrees of wear from circulation, and this extreme rarity is what drives prices into the millions, because when you have thousands of wealthy collectors around the world competing for fewer than 15 coins, basic economics tells you that prices will skyrocket, and they have, with the finest known example selling for $9 million at a private auction that made international news. Beyond the wrong planchet copper error, there are other valuable 1987 penny varieties that collectors seek, though none approach the astronomical values of the copper example. For instance, 1987 double die pennies exist, with doubling visible on the date and/or lettering, and depending on the strength of the doubling and the coin's condition, these can be worth anywhere from $50 to $5,000, which might not sound like much compared to $9 million, but it's still a fantastic return on a 1-cent investment. There are also 1987 off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly centered in the collar die during striking, resulting in part of the design missing and a blank crescent visible, and these can range from $25 for minor off-center errors to $1,000, or more for dramatic 50% or greater off-center strikes, especially if the date is fully visible, because collectors prefer errors where they can still identify the coin's date and denomination. Then there are die cracks, die breaks, and die cuts. These occur when the striking die develops a crack or breaks completely, transferring raised lines or lumps of metal onto the finished coins. And while most of these are worth just a few dollars, significant die breaks or cuts can command $100 to $500 from specialized error collectors who focus on these varieties, creating a whole sub-market within the hobby that most people never even know exists. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1987 copper penny story is how it changed collector behavior across the entire hobby. Before these discoveries, most collectors largely ignored modern pennies from the 1980s and beyond, assuming they were too recent and too common to have any significant value. But the 1987 copper penny proved that even very recent coins can harbor million-dollar secrets, and this realization sparked a renewed interest in searching through modern pocket change, examining roll after roll of pennies from banks, and carefully weighing and testing suspicious candidates. Coin roll hunting, as this hobby is called, has exploded in popularity, with thousands of people now regularly buying sealed boxes of pennies from their banks, searching through them coin by coin, and returning the unwanted ones while keeping potential errors for further investigation. It's become a treasure hunt that anyone can participate in for minimal investment, just the time it takes to examine coins and the small amount of money tied up in coin rolls while you search them, and the potential reward is life-changing wealth if you happen to find one of these ultra-rare errors. The psychology of error coin collecting is fascinating to consider. Why would someone pay $9 million for a piece of metal that cost 1 cent to produce and has a face value of 1 cent? The answer lies in the intersection of rarity, history, and human competitive instinct. Collectors aren't just buying metal, they're buying a piece of mint history, a tangible artifact of human error, a trophy that demonstrates their expertise and resources, and most importantly, an asset so rare that owning it places them in an elite group of perhaps a dozen people worldwide who can make the same claim. It's similar to why people pay millions for rare stamps, vintage cars, fine art, or ancient artifacts. The monetary value is almost beside the point. It's really about ownership of something extraordinary, something unique, something that others desire but cannot have. And in this way, rare error coins satisfy deep psychological needs for status, accomplishment, and belonging to an exclusive club of those in the know. The verification process for a potential 1987 copper penny is absolutely critical, because the difference between a genuine error worth millions and a normal zinc penny worth 1 cent or worse, a counterfeit designed to fool collectors, can only be determined through professional authentication. This means submitting your coin to a major grading service like PCGS or NGC, where it will undergo a battery of tests including precise weight measurement, specific gravity testing to determine density, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to analyze the exact metal composition, and microscopic examination of the surfaces to detect any signs of tampering or artificial alteration. These services charge fees ranging from $35 for standard authentication up to several $100s for coins suspected of being extremely valuable. But this investment is absolutely worth it, because their expert opinion and tamper-evident holder will either confirm you have a genuine treasure or save you from the embarrassment and potential legal trouble of trying to sell a counterfeit or misidentified coin. Plus, coins authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC command significantly higher prices in the marketplace because buyers trust their expertise and guarantee, making the authentication fee a small price to pay for the increase in resale value and market credibility. Stories of ordinary people finding these rare 1987 copper pennies are unfortunately few and far between given their extreme rarity. But they do exist and they're incredibly inspiring. There's the account of a retired postal worker in Arizona who had been coin roll hunting as a hobby for years, searching through hundreds of dollars worth of pennies every week without finding anything particularly valuable, until one day in 2019 when he was weighing a batch of 1987 pennies just out of habit, and one of them weighed significantly more than the others. He couldn't believe what he was seeing on the scale display, so he weighed it 3 more times to be sure, and each time it showed 3.11 grams, indicating a copper composition. He immediately submitted the coin to NGC for authentication, and when it came back genuine, his life changed forever. He sold the coin at auction for $2.8 million, which after auction fees and taxes still netted him enough money to pay off all his debts, buy a new home in a better climate, and set up trust funds for his grandchildren, all because he took the time to weigh his pennies and knew what to look for, proving that knowledge and patience really can pay off in extraordinary ways. The future market for 1987 copper pennies and similar rare error coins looks incredibly strong, driven by several long-term trends. First, the number of serious coin collectors worldwide continues to grow, especially in emerging markets like China and India, where growing middle and upper classes are developing interests in Western collectibles, expanding the pool of potential buyers for rare American coins. Second, wealthy investors increasingly view tangible collectibles like rare coins as portfolio diversification tools, uncorrelated with stock and bond markets and capable of significant appreciation, which brings investment capital into the hobby that didn't exist a generation ago. You now have hedge funds, family offices, and high-net-worth individuals competing with traditional collectors for the finest and rarest pieces, driving prices to levels that would have been unimaginable just 20 or 30 years ago. Third, the fixed and actually shrinking supply of genuine error coins means that as long as demand remains strong or grows, prices will inevitably increase over time, following the inexorable logic of supply and demand, and barring a complete collapse of the collectibles market, which seems unlikely given centuries of human fascination with rare objects. The long-term trend for pieces like the 1987 copper penny is almost certainly upward, making them not just fascinating collectibles but potentially sound investments as well. But let's bring this back to you, the viewer watching this video right now. What are your chances of actually finding a 1987 copper penny? Mathematically, they're quite slim given that only 10 to 15 examples are confirmed to exist out of billions of 1987 pennies produced, but they're not zero, and that's the key point that keeps collectors searching, because unlike winning the lottery where your odds are precisely calculable and astronomically low, with coin collecting there's always the possibility that dozens or even hundreds of these error coins are still out there in circulation or sitting in collections where owners don't know what they have, and you could be the one who finds the next example. The thrill of the hunt, the possibility of discovery, the dream of life-changing wealth hidden in pocket change. These are powerful motivators that drive thousands of people to examine their coins carefully, learn about errors and varieties, and never stop searching, because they know that every single penny they look at could be the one that changes everything. To maximize your chances of finding valuable error pennies like the 1987 copper, you need to develop a systematic approach. First, get yourself a decent gram scale that can measure to at least 0.1 gram accuracy. These are available online for $15 to $30 and are absolutely essential for distinguishing copper from zinc pennies based on weight. Second, educate yourself about the specific errors and varieties that are valuable, focusing on the years and error types that bring premium prices like wrong planchet errors, dramatic double dies, and significant off-center strikes. There are excellent books, websites, and YouTube channels dedicated to error coin education, so take advantage of these free or low-cost resources to build your knowledge base. Third, establish a relationship with your local bank and start buying rolls of pennies to search through. Most banks will sell you boxes of 50 rolls, $25 total, without any issues as long as you have an account, and some collectors search through multiple boxes per week, finding not just error pennies, but also old copper pennies from before 1982, which are worth keeping because their metal value exceeds their face value when copper prices are high. Fourth, when you find a potentially valuable error, don't get too excited too quickly. Document it with photos, do your research to see if it matches known varieties, and if it seems legitimate, submit it to a professional grading service for authentication, because jumping to conclusions or making premature claims about a coin's value can lead to disappointment or embarrassment if it turns out to be a common variety or just a damaged normal coin. The story of the 1987 copper penny is ultimately a story about hope, about the possibility that extraordinary value can still be discovered in the modern world, that not all treasures are buried on remote islands or locked in museum vaults, and that sometimes fortune favors those who simply pay attention to details that others overlook. It's a reminder that we live in a world full of hidden wonders, where a humble penny can be worth $9 million, where knowledge and patience can unlock wealth beyond imagination, and where the next great discovery might be sitting in your pocket right now, waiting for you to recognize it for the treasure it truly is. So the next time you receive pennies and change, don't just toss them in a jar and forget about them. Take a moment to examine them, check the dates, feel the weight, look for anything unusual, because you never know when you might be holding a piece of mint history worth millions, and even if you never find a rare error worth life-changing money. The hobby of coin collecting offers endless fascination, education, and the thrill of the hunt that makes every new discovery, no matter how small, a victory worth celebrating. The 1987 Lincoln penny, with its impossible copper composition and $9 million price tag, stands as a testament to the enduring appeal of error coins, the passion of collectors who dedicate their lives to studying and preserving these artifacts, and the simple truth that in numismatics, as in life, sometimes the most valuable things are hiding in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone with the knowledge, patience, and luck to recognize them and claim the reward. And with that knowledge now in your possession, you're equipped to be that person, the one who makes the next great discovery, the one who finds the penny that changes everything. So keep searching, keep learning, keep hoping, and who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one making headlines as the finder of the next $1 million error coin, proving once and for all that fortune really does favor the prepared mind.